heimlich, who's gonna be patient enough to wait this out with me, oh with me, wait this out. What I learn how to breathe again, what I learn how to breathe again, what I learn how to live again.
So I'm Brooklynn Rae. I am a musician. I live in Cincinnati. I grew up in Northeast Ohio, in a really small town called Brookfield, and I have been in Cincy for almost 4 years. I've been playing music for about 6 years. Let's see, yeah. So I was like 20-ish, 21, 27 now. So that's kind of when I first started learning guitar and writing lyrics. So, I mean, I was always really passionate about music from a very early age. Like, I started collecting CDs from age 5, on. So, and that was always the way that I would kind of be rewarded, or like my mom just would give me CDs as gifts for like every holiday because she knew that was my favorite thing. So I was always really interested in like finding music and listening to different artists. And I think right around my like sophomore year of high school is when I found some YouTube people that I really enjoyed. And I think that was kind of my dream, was like, I want to be a YouTube sensation, So I think, yeah, around my 15, 16-year-old self was like, I would love to do this music thing. Yeah, there's 2 people that come to my mind immediately at that age, and I loved, there was a YouTuber named Kina Grannis. She was just like a singer-songwriter, had like a really sweet soul, and I felt like I really related to her writing and like her sound. And then I also had discovered Amy Winehouse at that time too, so I was just like starting to kind of try and sing. I had never really tried it, and so I think with Amy I was like, oh my gosh, I just loved her and felt so like inspired by her, and I loved kind of her jazzy sound, and like knowing that she kind of sang in her lower register too. I was like, okay, cool, I'm gonna try it. And then it was just really slow going, it was just like a song or two that first year, I think. It's so interesting because I think in a lot of ways I think to myself that the things I'm creating won't have an effect on other people. It's interesting. I don't necessarily think that I'm like really able to make people feel something. I don't know. But so when I create, I'm not necessarily thinking about how people will respond to it, but I think more so I really like being able to share a moment with people, and I like being able to like then have some dialogue, and I think it continues to like encourage me and like move me when people do say that they feel something, or that they can relate, or that they just like appreciated what I put out. It's hard for me to believe in myself, and I think in sharing things that I've created and in being encouraged and affirmed after sharing, I think it has allowed me to continue to explore myself creatively. So it's going to be a little EP. It's going to be 4 songs. I've been working on it for a little bit, and it's coming along. I feel really excited about it. And I believe that I'm going to just call it Faces, like Faces EP. So there's a song on the record that'll be called Faces. And so I think it's a song I've really been enjoying in the last couple months, and it's become like my favorite song. So I think it would be a proper representation of the EP for me. I tend to see like images, so the song was kind of birthed from just a picture that I saw in my head. It was like 2 young kids kind of by this really beautiful, like, big tree. And I kind of see it near like a lake too, on like a little bit of a slanted hill, just grass. So I wrote the song, and it's kind of a concept of being young kids and kind of looking up and watching the clouds move and watching the birds and kind of thinking about up, like the sky being heaven, and kind of asking, like thinking about people that even as kids you might have lost and that you're thinking about, and kind of looking for them in heaven. And the chorus kind of says, isn't it something that someday there'll be kids looking for us up there? It's definitely existential, and it's funny because I think as I write it, I truly am not necessarily thinking like, I want to write an existential piece and I really want it to convey this emotion. Like, it's just something that I see, and it's just like a thought, and I just kind of build from there. And so yeah, I guess it's just, I've always been really drawn to the idea of death, and I think because of my faith, that was not necessarily a sad thing for me. And then when I lost the first person that was close to me, I think it was interesting going through my own experience of grief. When I was 21, I lost my cousin, and we were the closest in age of all the cousins. I am an only child, so I grew up being really close to my family and my cousins. So and he was young. I mean, he was about to turn 21, and so that was my first time ever losing someone that I loved, and yeah, that was an interesting experience. I think I remember immediately thinking that I had to be okay, and that I was supposed to just like kind of get over it. But it was like many months of me just like having so many thoughts about him and thinking about memories, and just like, I don't know, thinking about him and wanting him to be like properly represented and like remembered. So what's interesting, I don't think I've said this to anyone yet, and I've been kind of wanting to share this as I've performed the song Faces, but I actually see him and I as kids. And because that was kind of the sort of thing that we used to do together. We would hang out in the backyard and we'd play on the swing set, and we would just like, there was like a little tree in the backyard, and I don't think I initially wrote it like with him in mind, but I think like as I perform it and when I really think about it, I see us, so. And the first word that like comes to my mind is beauty, and I think somehow like through writing, I think I was just drawn to things that were like beautiful. And so even in my songwriting, though it tends to have melancholic elements, I think I've always been drawn to melancholy. Just like I've always found beauty in like sadder things. So even in that, I think it was an experience that allowed me to kind of find beauty in the things around me and the experiences of others, in the more painful things. I think it just kind of unlocked that for me a little bit. I think growing up I would write poetry. Like I would just kind of write little poems, but I don't know if I ever thought it was good, So, but I knew that I enjoyed writing. Like I always excelled in my writing classes, and was kind of affirmed by certain teachers that I had like something. I think for me, it feels easier to like think about someone else's experience. I feel as though in my life I've had a lot of, I think about the positive things that have happened in my life. Like I don't know if I've even fully connected with the more negative things, I think I kind of operate in a kind of like peaceful, steady place. So it seems easier to connect to someone else's experience and try and think from their point of view. I don't know. It's almost like it's fun, and I feel like I can kind of connect to it a little bit easier than my own journey, you know. Yeah, I think I'm learning that I tend to avoid things, so I don't necessarily like work through my things like head on by any means. And I almost have a hard time like fully acknowledging my darker emotions and my pain. So I think I know that I use music as a way to kind of forget, and not in terms of me writing, but just like surrounding myself with it and just like really listening. And it does feel like an escape for me. There are times too when I feel like when I am sad, I don't necessarily like to listen to very sad things. Like, I think I like to feel those emotions because I have a hard time channeling my pain and sadness on my own. I think I've learned that I really enjoy to surround myself with those sort of sounds more regularly, because it's the moment that I can finally like feel something, you know. And because it's not necessarily my own, then I'm like, okay, this, like, I can allow myself to go there and can understand it a little bit better. But yeah, I think sometimes when I am sad, I think sometimes just like having space to myself and just having like a space that I feel very comfortable in and very relaxed in, and just like a little bit of stillness is usually good for me to just take a breath and just kind of think through some things, you know, slow down a little bit. I mean, yeah, I connected with music immediately, you know, as a little human, and I think I love the variety. Like, there's just so much music. There's so many different types of artists and different sounds, and I think I love that there is such a range for different places that I'm in. So, yeah, I guess in ways I am like honored and would love to be able to take part in the, you know, beautiful realm of music.
Marbles in my head are rolling around and falling down the back of my throat. I'm beginning to choke on thoughts that I didn't even know I had. I didn't know I had.
So I wrote Marbles. I write my songs like pretty sparsely. So that song was from 2016, I believe. And I remember when I first like sat down to start writing it, and I was sitting on the edge of my tub in my house, and that was a very challenging season for me. I was pretty depressed, and there were things that had kind of happened leading up to that time where just things were kind of were just tricky to kind of like work through. So like I had just broken up with my first love, and I was still fairly new to Cincinnati, and I was kind of in between jobs. And then the big one was that my car broke down, and then I was like didn't have a car and was just taking buses and walking and trying to kind of figure that out for about 7 months, and it was through the winter. So not having a vehicle and being someone who's like really independent and likes to just be able to get up and go and do things in my own time and really have a hard time asking for help. I think all of that was like just almost too much for me to handle, and I don't think I quite realized at the time, but there was a relationship, a friendship that I was in that was really affecting me mentally and emotionally, and like draining me and making me not like myself very much. So when I sat down to write Marbles, I I sort of had not really gone through something quite like that before, and felt like I was a burden if I was kind of being really open with people about how I was feeling. And for that to go on for months and me feeling like, how am I going to, like, I don't know what it looks like to be out of this. Like, I almost don't know if I'm ever going to be myself again. I don't know if this is like the new me, you know. I think that was my fear, that I'm never going to be the way I was. And so I remember kind of talking to different friends and just feeling like I don't like bringing this to them every time, not being able to like energize them or be there for them because I have my own stuff going on, you know. So Marbles, I think for me was just a realization that like, yeah, I'm in a deeper place, and like will people want to be by my side while I kind of work through this time, you know, and figure my stuff out. So I'm really grateful that I decided to like put some energy into writing, and because I think a lot of times when people are feeling depressed, it's hard for them to enjoy the things that they love to do, and like to even find that energy, you know. And so I know that there were just like a lot of things I wasn't necessarily doing, but I also did feel that I was kind of really seeking like certain music, and like I just had to have an outlet, you know. I had to have some way to capture that time a little bit. So I was writing like kind of a poem a day. I did like a 100 days project, and that was really helpful for me because I think it allowed me the space to just really be honest with myself and where I was and how I was feeling. Because even like growing up, when I would journal, for some reason it felt really hard to be honest. And I felt like I had to, even if I knew that I was going to be the only person looking at it, for some reason I felt like I really couldn't get in there and be totally vulnerable about the spaces that I was in. I think in the last few years, I've just allowed myself to be as real as I can be, you know, and as I want to, and not necessarily think about other people in it. Just like thinking about doing it for myself and knowing that it has really helped me to heal and process things. I think it's nice to have a space to share my thoughts. Yeah. And I think too, it's almost something I'm looking to do for my future self, because I think there's something really important about kind of documenting like where you are. And I like being able to kind of look back and reflect and truly have an accurate representation of where I was, you know. So I still have a pretty vivid memory of the very first time I sat down to make something, and it was a summer where things kind of didn't end up playing out the way I thought they were going to. I was supposed to be an orientation leader for my second year at college, and that kind of fell through, and I took that pretty hard. But I decided to kind of still stay in my college town, and I just like rented a room from someone in a house that no one else was in, and I just started working at the Chipotle down the street that I could walk to. And I remember that summer being so, there was just like such a feeling that I had then. I felt so inspired by everything, and so I was like going to the library and getting all these books and reading, and I was journaling consistently, and I was kind of keeping in touch with friends, and I was writing. So yeah, I feel like I had a certain momentum and energy there that I never had really experienced before. So I remember just thinking like, okay, let me just take a stab at this and see how it goes. And so I remember sitting on this couch, and it truly was just an image that I had. And I pictured like a guy and a girl. Like, I don't know if they really had like faces that I could identify, but I saw them, and I saw like a heart and inside of a jar, like on a shelf. And so I don't know, I just kind of started to write from that. And usually I will find a couple chords and get like a feeling or an emotion from them, and then just kind of build around that. So the image and the feeling, and then just kind of tried to marry the two. I think what's cool about music, and we kind of touched on this before, is that it kind of marks a moment in time. So I love that I have all these little bookmarks kind of through my life of things I was thinking about, themes that I was experiencing, pain that I was going through. And I love that I was able to take the time to create something to represent that season. And I think, yeah, it's been helpful for continuing to create and challenging myself to come up with new ideas. I think it's been really helpful to know that there's times that I've gone through that I'm not in any longer, and just to see how I've grown, like, as a person through my writing, and as a person, as a human who just, like, makes art. I know that when I was in 8th grade, that was one other time that I can remember that was a little bit challenging for me, kind of feeling a little bit depressed, and I just didn't know how to really communicate with anyone, like, what I was feeling. I don't think I even quite realized what I was experiencing myself, but I knew that I was, like, pretty irritable, and would get angry a lot, and wanted to be alone a lot of the time, and just felt, like, sad. I feel like the one thing I remember that was so helpful was watching Ellen. Like, every day after school I'd come home and I was like, okay, I'll watch Ellen and I'll feel better, you know? So I don't even know if I was journaling then. I didn't talk to my parents, I didn't tell my best friends. And I know that people probably knew that I was not quite myself in that time, but I feel like I was having a really hard time just acknowledging my own feelings. And I think in my adult life, I love, like, personality tools, and I've always been really into psych. So I think trying to, like, learn myself better and learn the ways that I have just tried to cope, and, like, my natural habits, I think just kind of learning myself more in those ways helps me to, like, have grace for myself, and also, like, teaches me what the healthier alternatives are to, like, working through things with myself, you know? The Enneagram, yeah. I love the Enneagram so much. That's I feel like that's it's like my top 3 loves, you know? It's right under music for me, I think. And I think too, I mean, I use that tool almost more so to be able to understand and relate to others too, you know? Like, that's always been a big priority for me, is not even just for myself, but I love to be able to, like, see people better. My faith was huge. And I grew up in a faith-based home, and so that was it felt very natural for me. Like, at a young age, I felt like I understood, like, I'm a Christian, so I think, like, I remember being very young, 7 or 8, and understanding that, like, Jesus died on the cross, like, for all of our sins. So I definitely found a lot of comfort in my relationship with God as I was growing up. I was not necessarily always, like, really knowledgeable. Like, I didn't really know the Bible very well, but I do know that I had some type of relationship with God, and so I would, like, pray and would kind of speak to him in my writing and in my journaling, and I think that was definitely really helpful. I think if I'm thinking back to just the time that happened a couple years ago, I think, like, the most powerful thing I could have told myself is that, like, this is temporary. Like, this is not who you are, you know, and, like, you will return to who you've always been. I think that would have just been, like, would have released me, and that I genuinely felt so afraid that I was never gonna feel the ways that I did and have empathy the ways that I have, and yeah, I just felt like I couldn't love people very well because I was having a hard time loving myself, you know? And I just was fearful that I would never return to that. So I know a lot of times people will hold themselves back from creating something because they don't think that they're talented enough or that they have like a gift. And I think that shouldn't even be a factor a lot of the time. I think that we just need to put something out to kind of express ourselves and allow ourselves to feel things and to process. So anytime that someone's feeling hindered, I think that they should just do what they want to do. You know, I think that it's not about what other people think about it. It's not about it being like groundbreaking. It's just about getting to share a part of yourself and learn and grow and heal, I think.
Marbles in my head.